Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Aaron Kivett with Newforma. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm going to start off with some quick introductions here. So I'm Director of Partnerships for Newforma. I've been in the AEC industry for about 20 years. And I've spent the last 10 years or so at Newforma helping customers manage project information. And we're excited today to work with Chris and Procore on our integration and partnership. I'll go ahead and let Chris introduce himself here.
Aaron, thanks a lot for that. So Chris Langiza here with Procore Technologies. I act as our Director of Business Development for our marketplace. So many of the integrations and partners that you've seen on our marketplace, including that of Newforma, our team manages. I've spent about the last 15 years in the construction industry, really with a passion for connecting both people and solutions to build better workflows for the companies that I worked with and now our customers. So really excited to chat more about this integration today and where we're moving the Procore and Newforma partnership forward.
So a little bit about each of our companies. So wanted to just quickly provide an overview of Newforma and our flagship product, Newforma Project Center. We pioneered the project information management category back in 2004 with a focus on solving problems for design firms. And this has led to pretty broad success within the industry for helping design firms manage project information. And you can see we handle a lot of information for our customers each day and each month and each year. And as I mentioned earlier, we're excited about working with Procore, the ability to further help architects and engineers streamline their projects.
Thanks, Aaron. And just a little high-level overview of Procore. So we are a construction management platform really geared at connecting everyone in the construction process, from owners to general contractors, specialty contractors, architects, and engineers on a platform. And so we have built out a platform that allows not only for our customers to use the pre-built tools, as you'll see here in pre-construction and project management, resource management, and financial management, but also to extend the value of that platform by connecting into our app marketplace and connecting to our partners, those like Newforma, who can build out very streamlined workflows that continue the value and connect the different stakeholders that are happening on projects. At the end of the day, it's all about having a better access to the information, more accountability, and the ability to reduce the risk on projects that are becoming more and more complex every day. So as as I mentioned, the projects that we work on in the construction industry really have becoming more and more complex. And you've probably seen this or felt this on a project, I know that I have, where the information is just flying in every single possible direction. There's emails, there's phone calls, there's notes that you've taken in meetings, there's a document management system, you may have internal servers, there may be third party, there may be cloud solutions where this information is being stored. But what's so difficult about that is it ends up with one person who's trying to hold it all together, and I'm not sure if this person is crying or sweating, but it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of responsibility to be kind of at the center of that. And the problem that we really wanted to solve was to streamline that communication, to really connect all of the stakeholders, connect all the collaborators that happen on a project, no matter what the communication method is, allow them to communicate and collaborate in a single place on a single platform.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, this is compounded by the fact that the industry is unique in that we have all of these different companies that come together to create, one of a kind project usually. So you can imagine for each company involved in this project, they've got, that same tangle of communications and, somebody sweating over how they're going to get the project done on time and on budget.
Yeah, much like the best sports teams in the world, construction projects are truly a team effort, right? It requires all of these individuals, from designers, the contractors, specialty consultants, the trades that are performing the work in the field, and then let's not forget about someone is actually funding and paying to have this facility or this building built. And so how those team members come together and collaborate is extremely important and has been the source of pain and frustration on many projects before. In construction, we've really been completely under digitized and have not leveraged technology to increase the productivity in our interest in our industry for really most of our existence. When you look at the graph on the left, you'll see that the productivity in many other industries, as they've implemented technologies to support them, has really grown exponentially. As we look at construction, it's actually started to get a little bit worse. Now, we're finally starting to see that line flatten out a little bit because we've started to address the problem that we are one of the least digitized industries across all industries around the world. And if you look at the graphic on the right, you'll notice that if it wasn't for fishermen and hunters, we'd probably be dead last about how digitized we are in our process. And if you know much about actually agriculture, you would know that they're implementing a lot of really interesting technology in agriculture. So we got to at least keep up so we don't fall to dead last. And I think what's happening is we're making this transition from a very paper-based and disjointed workflow to digital, and to using mobile devices and using cloud-based solutions, and that's awesome. And now we need to start to leverage the insights that we can do from that as well. But there's still one problem. Why aren't we recognizing the gains that other industries have? And that is because this data that we all have, whether it's with the owner, the architect, the contractor, the specialty trade contractor, it's really siloed. It's not places where we can all get to it. The processes are broken, they're disjointed, the data doesn't flow between them. So we're all looking at different information. We're all looking at different data, and that is not what's going to make projects more efficient. We may be able to integrate and we may be able to connect systems of our own internally, but there's not been a lot done to connect systems across all of the stakeholders in the industry.
Yeah, and this was made pretty clear to us after our state of the industry survey that we did last year, that some of the key technology challenges that the industry has here are time spent on administrative tasks and sharing files with other team members. So one of the most common ways of sources of this friction, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are amongst the different companies that are collaborating together on this project. So to illustrate that, Chris is going to talk a little bit about different types of integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at a project, one of the things that you'll notice is that there are a lot of stakeholders. We've talked about those stakeholders, and each one of them has its own set of technology, its own set of tools that it needs to use to deliver on that project. Now, over the last several years, we've seen a lot of push to actually integrate those technologies inside of those firms. So we'll call this horizontal integration. So a general contractor who has a handful of solutions, 10 or 12 things in their technology stack, making those things be able to talk together, having one central system, and maybe that's Procore in the middle, and making those tools to all talk to Procore so that no matter who the user is, no matter who the collaborator is, they can see that information. And we're also seeing the same thing happen on the architect side, with being able to see those systems such as Nuforma and maybe BIM 360 and SharePoint and Outlook all be integrated there as well. But this is not where really efficiency gets gained, because it's a little bit self-serving. We're only focused on our own internal group, which is great, but in order to really improve the project overall, we need to eliminate the need for that data to be double entered across the stakeholders, right? So the RFI information that's generated by the subcontractor that gets handed off to the general contractor that then gets submitted to the design team and reviewed by the owner really shouldn't have to be entered 4 times. It should be something that's vertically integrated, something that passes between the different stakeholders that exist on a project so that they don't have to do that double entry, so they don't lose the time, so they don't lose fidelity in that information. But it's not necessarily easy. It's a more difficult challenge for sure, but it's one that will garner a lot more fruit for the project if it's completed.
So I think that takes us into what Newforma and Procore have been working on together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we decided what to integrate and the process we went through here. So I think the focus for Procore is with the construction team, and the focus for Newforma is with the design team. And amongst those two teams, there's significant amount of friction. As Chris mentioned, double entering data is painful for everybody involved in the project, and seems like a problem that should be able to be solved by computers and technology. But that this friction that we see, this is highest where the workflows overlap between these companies, right? So RFIs, submittals, again, are a really good example of where the workflows between the design and construction teams need to be tightly integrated. And today they just don't line up. And I think something I've heard Chris talk about before that is really powerful is this idea that the horizontal integrations are great for solving problems within an organization, but it's really completing the workflows are where the integrations we think are really going to save the projects the most time, money, and frustration. So to think about just an illustration of how an integration can impact your firm, as we've talked about, the key area of friction here is submittals and RFIs between these two groups. The average project, has about 800 RFIs and 440 submittals. So, I mean, that's obviously going to vary a lot between the types of projects that you do, and how big they are, how long they are, how complicated they are. So feel free to plug your own numbers into this slide. But if you look at these, we believe the integration will save you about a quarter of an hour per item there. So over the course of one of these projects, you're looking at eliminating 310 hours. And at a $150 bill rate, this stuff adds up to significant money.
I think one of the things that's really interesting here, Aaron, is that this is also from the design perspective, right? So there's probably double that amount when you talk about what's actually having to be done also on the contractor side or the subcontractor side. So I think that number grows pretty exponentially as well.
Yep, and I think this is also a number that a lot of people don't necessarily realize they're paying. You're not writing a check to a software company for $46,000 on your project, but this is time that is going into going somewhere. So with this integration, you can have fewer people getting more done, or you could be doing more projects in less time. So to kind of prove this out, we took the process here for a submittal where a contractor is using Procore and the designer is using Newforma, and we listed out the different steps that would be required in order to complete a submittal workflow. So I won't read all of these, but you can see that there are 13 different steps throughout the entire process. Most of these steps are manual things like email something somewhere or log in or upload. And what we've been able to do as part of the integration here is go from these 13 manual steps down to 4. So submittals and RFIs from Procore, automatically show up in Newforma with all of the metadata and files, so there's no double data entry. And when that review process, is complete in Newforma, that completed submittal or RFI will automatically show up in Procore. So this was, we think a pretty huge time savings, as we've illustrated here. Anything you want to add to this, Chris?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting here is like there's really nothing else to kind of get rid of on these steps. I mean, you still are going to need to review the submittal, and that's what it's all about, is reducing the amount of time that it takes from when something is submitted to getting it back in the field. So, by also automating this process, there's just a lot less opportunity for error. Something gets lost, something doesn't make it in somebody's inbox, it gets accidentally deleted. It's not top of mind for someone because it's not in the system that they work in every day. There's so many added benefits just above and beyond the reduction of steps here. But I mean, it is truly impressive on what we've been able to accomplish as working together on this, on how we can really streamline this process for the overall benefit of the project.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the advantages of this integration that might not be readily apparent here. And I think, I think a key problem that both of our companies deal with here is that for a single project, not every one of those team members is going to agree to use the same software solution or same platform. So the contractor has their own interests, the owner has theirs, the architect has theirs. So rather than sort of trying to get everybody on board with the same tool, the integration here, it allows each company to use the solution that they're most familiar with. So the contractor doesn't have to spend time training somebody how to use their tool. The architect doesn't have to spend time training people how to, training the contractor how to use their tool. And as Chris mentioned, the integration here minimizes the risk of things falling through the cracks or an email lost in my inbox. It's automatically within Newforma, or the response is automatically back in Procore. The other thing I think is particularly valuable, especially on the design side, is as an architect, might have 2 or 3 projects in construction at any one point, and might be working with different or they're probably working with different contractors on each one of those projects. And I don't know that all of them will be using Procore, although they might be one day. So the architect, has to flip back and forth between these different tools. But the integration will allow them to stay in Newforma to get their work done. And the records retention issue is an important one for, this concept of everyone is probably not going to agree to use the same solution. Newforma can facilitate managing the project information for the designer for, the 10 years that they might need to keep those records. So the integration here provides value beyond just saving the time on the individual items. So we're pretty early we're pretty early into the process here. The connector is available to Newforma customers that request it today. So if you are a Newforma customer, you can speak with your account manager to go ahead and get the connector implemented. But our initial users of the connector, their experience has been pretty positive, and I think this was one of the more interesting quotes they provided us. But the idea here is that helping our users manage fast-moving projects, getting more done with less, is really what we're trying to do for the industry as a whole. So with that, we'll take any questions that people have about anything.
Aaron, just to add a couple points there, we've heard from a lot of our contractor customers and subcontractor customers that they're very excited about this integration. That there's enough friction between the design team and the contractors on the project, that fighting over which system to use and where did that submittal end up or what date that there is, that this can just eliminate some of those, some of the kind of the low-hanging fruits that are problems on a project, and really get everybody pulling in the same direction and working in systems that are comfortable, right? Anytime someone's forced to use a system that they're not comfortable with, even if it is great, it's change, it's new to them. So, it shouldn't be dismissed at how important it is that if your company has made an investment in Procore or your customer company has made an investment in Nuforma, that you can remain in those systems from project to project and be able to collaborate the way you should be able to collaborate between you and between a contractor and a design professional.
So we do have a question here. If we can demo the integration or the connector. This is actually a difficult question for me to answer, because it's really difficult for our marketing people, because there's really nothing to see in the integration. What happens is the contractor does what they do in Procore, and then it just shows up in Nuforma. So a demo of it would be staring at a submittal that's in Nuforma. So there's nothing that a user would actually see as part of this this connector process.
Aaron, can you expand a little bit more just about the timing of it, how long it takes on that, what what information is pulled over from Procore? I think that will be useful to folks as well.
Sure. So when a submittal is created in Procore, the contractor will assign a reviewer to that submittal, and as soon as that is done, it could take up to 30 minutes. But what will happen is that submittal will automatically be transferred into Nuforma. So we bring over all of the information that an architect would expect to see. So the subject, the section number, the number, any other metadata that was entered into Procore, as well as the files. We do ignore some parts of the Procore submittal. So for example, we do not bring in the due date from Procore, because the architect usually doesn't care what due date the contractor is assigned. So that information will flow in, and then when it's returned, what'll happen is, again, all of that same information will go back. So any notes, any files, and again, where it looks like, if you're a Nuforma user, it looks like the contractor went to InfoExchange and submitted the submittal through there. And if you're a Procore user, it looks like the architect went into Procore and added their response directly into Procore. So it's pretty simple.
Thanks for that, Aaron.
So there's another question here about what the notifications look like. So the notifications today are pretty much the same as they were before the integration. So the architect will receive a notification from Procore when that submittal is assigned to them. Additionally, you'll get an email notifying you from Nuforma when that submittal appears in Nuforma. And then when the response is generated, an email will be created that the Nuforma user can choose whether or not they want to send to the contractor. We are working on figuring out some improvements to this notification process. So if we're definitely open to improving the integration in the future, I think we can do that with the notifications. So there's a question here about what's involved on the contractor side for setting up the connector. And this is also a good question. It's one we've gotten quite a bit here. From the contractor side, there's really nothing that you need to do within Procore to use the connector that's different than what you're probably already doing. So what you'll have to do is you'll need to invite the architect to the Procore project, and you'll need to give them permissions. I think it's standard permission to the RFI and submittal modules within Procore. After that, it's up to the design side to configure or implement and configure the connector within Nuforma. So if you are a contractor and you have a project that you're working on with a Nuforma designer, what you should do is have your Nuforma designer get in touch with their Nuforma account manager to get that connector set up. There's a question here about additional webinars. So we will record this webinar, or we are recording this webinar, and we will make that available on the website here. I don't know if we'll get together and do this again.
We can always do it again if we need to, Aaron.
Always happy to give the people what they want. Any other questions? There's a question here for you, Chris. What Procore version is needed for the connector?
Yeah, so great question. So Procore doesn't necessarily have versions. So as long as the contractor or the purchaser of Procore has a subscription and has access to the project management tools, which is our most commonly used set of tools, then the integration will work just fine. Because we're a cloud-based SaaS solution, we don't really do versioning. Every updates and improvements are rolled out kind of on demand. So anyone with an active license will be able to use the integration.
So Nuforma is not cloud-based, and we do make you upgrade. So ouch there, Chris. You do need version 12.2.2 or later of Nuforma to use the connector, and that is available. So if you do want to implement it, that can be done today. So there's a question here: when Nuforma responds and closes an RFI, does Procore auto-generate an email as it does now for the team? So I am not 100% sure. I'm like 90% sure that right now Procore is not generating an email when that response comes in from Nuforma. So that is, like I said, another area we're looking to improve the way these notifications work. So the contractor will be relying on the Nuforma notification.
I would add a little bit to that, Aaron. So that there should be a notification that's sent to the RFI manager to that a response has been posted to that RFI. It will not send out an RFI notification that everything is closed and distribute it to the entire team automatically. That's kind of how we've built our RFI workflow with RFI managers. But it's definitely something that we could look at in the future on how we could improve those notifications and those emails that those responses have come in and the RFI is closed. There's been a lot of conversation between Nuforma, ourselves, and in the industry in general about statuses And if it's closed by the architect, is it closed to the contractor? Is it closed to the subcontractor? And that's a little bit of an open question right now. Is how do you handle those different statuses between different users to respect that, hey, so just because somebody submits an answer doesn't mean that it's fully answered, or it doesn't mean that the response you got back from the contractor is 100% right. So the ability to manage those within your own system matters quite a bit as well.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly complicated problem because there's also a trust, a trust issue around the notifications. The contractor wants to make sure that the architect is notified, and their notifications come from Procore. So how do we align these notifications so that everyone's needs are met is definitely something that we need to address. So there's another question here. I think I'm going to throw this one to you, Chris. If a submittal is sent out to revise and resubmit, how do you ensure that a vendor or consultant is going to revise his drawing and conduct his fabrication from the latest drawing? I don't know how to answer that one.
That is a fantastic question, and I'm not sure any technology in the world can solve that. This is one of those things, hey, we've told you that you need to revise and resubmit. Don't make sure that they don't just go and build off of what has been marked up. It becomes more of a process conversation. Now, the good thing is that when Procore gets those revise and resubmit statuses, and we can communicate those downstream to the subcontractor or to the supplier who submitted that information, so we will have documentation at least that we notified them. And because of the way that we track those submittals, we also should have good visibility into what has not been resubmitted. So it really becomes a management game at that point, ensuring that the project team, the project manager, project engineer, superintendent are staying on top of getting those things resubmitted. It's like I said, it's more of a process challenge than it is a technology challenge.
Yeah, now that you've given me time to think about it, we do have a solution within Newforma. So when you do issue a response to a submittal that is set to revise and resubmit, we will create what we call an expected resubmittal that can be tracked within Newforma. So, if you have, it will be a process to go in and manage those expected resubmittals and make sure that, they're being followed up on. Good question. Got a couple more here. There's a question here. When the architect sends the submittal back for revision, is it flagged as a revise and resubmit on both Newforma and Procore? And the answer there is yes. That approval state for that submittal will show up both in Newforma and within Procore. And that makes me think of something kind of interesting that we've had to deal with as part of this integration, which is that the different approval states for a submittal, they don't always match between the architect and the contractor. So the architect might use, approved, rejected, revise, and resubmit, and the contractor might have, completely different ones set up in Procore. So as part of the integration, the designer will go into Newforma and they will match the Newforma options to the Procore options. But it's been surprising how frequently they're different, and people will ask me how to map them, and I'll tell them I don't I can't tell you how to do that. You should go talk to the contractor to figure that out. Yeah, so there's another question here. How do the actions align? So I just answered that one here. As part of the connector setup, you will make those alignments, those matching. You'll match those yourself. There's a question here about revisions to original submittals. So there is, I think this question is, this is actually from one of our early access customers. So not fair, Michelle. So there is a challenge with the way Procore handles submittals and RFIs differently than Nuforma handles submittals and RFIs. And if a submittal is marked, as closed within Nuforma, we don't let the contractor reopen that item. So if a change is made to that within Procore, after the item is closed in Nuforma, that is not reflected within Nuforma today. So the best practice for the integration here is for a new submittal, a resubmittal to be created for that item. We're looking at better ways to integrate the two systems together around these, reopening items. But part of that also comes down to just the way that different companies manage the CA process. Yeah, that is a challenge to figure out how to align the different workflows between the products and between the different organizations.
Yeah, and Aaron, I just to expand on that a little bit more, I think that this is another one of those situations where technology can take you a lot of the way there, but there's still process and communication that needs to happen. So, my recommendation is to have teams sit down at the beginning of the project and understand how the integration is going to work and understand what the process is going to be, so that when a item is either revise and resubmit or rejected and needs to be resubmitted, that they know the process is to go ahead and create a revision to that in Procore, create the next submittal number revision for that so that it can be resent over to Procore. I think if you communicate that in their kickoff meetings and we have that conversation about the same way that we talk about what things need to be submitted and go through the submittal log, I think that's very important to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows that the integration is going to work and how it's going to work, and that way, I think a lot of that challenge can be solved in the communication process at the beginning of a project and during kickoff.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. The technology cannot necessarily solve the fact that you need to talk to the other team members. There's a question here. It says Procore has a tool for searching PDF specs for submittals. Does Nuforma have something similar? So we do not have something similar today. However, we can import a spreadsheet of submittals from contractor. So usually the architect will include in their specs that the contractor should provide the architect a list of submittals that they plan to submit. And Nuforma can take that document and import it into Nuforma.
Yeah,
Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was going to say the good news is there that once the Procore tool is used to create that submittal log, it's actually very easy via our reporting tools to export that out to a CSV or an Excel file that could be given to your design team for them to bring into their Nuforma instance. I guess my question to you there, Aaron, is since those items would be already created in the log inside of Nuforma, would that have any effect on the integration itself?
So the way that it works today is if a submittal comes in from Procore, the architect will have a chance to match that to one of those expected submittals. That's a manual process right now. And integrating this expected submittal list with Procore is something that we are considering as, again, a future enhancement to the integration. So that's something that we might be able to automate that process in the future.
Awesome.
There is a question here under the drop-down options, the approved can be changed to as reviewed per AIA contract documents. So yes, the those approval options are all customizable both within Procore and within Newforma. So yeah, nobody uses the word approved, but you can change those as needed. The problem is, again, the designer can change it in Newforma, but the designer can't change it in Procore, and the contractor can change it in Procore, but they can't change it in Newforma. So you guys have to talk and figure out how to make your lists align. And that is all of the questions. It's a pretty good amount of questions. All right, we have another question.
Oh.
I thought we were out, Chris, but no, here comes another one. Does Procore number submittals the same across the board? I will let you take that one, Chris.
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Does Procore number submittals the same across the board?
Meaning across contractors. So there's two ways to kind of answer that question. One of them is whether you're within side of a single customer or across multiple customers, and I would say the answer is kind of the same for both. Each company, each Procore account, each Procore project has the ability to use their own set of specifications and their own set of codes for those specifications. So we follow the COS code, or excuse me, the CSI codes that are utilized in the specifications. That's part of our extraction process. And so if that is the case, then it should be consistent across a project to align with those, but may not be consistent across an entire company or consistent across multiple companies, because every project is going to have its own set of specifications.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the way that Newforma and integration are designed is, from the architect's perspective, we don't really care how the contractor has numbered them. We will bring in the contractor's number into Newforma and we'll store that. But if the designer wants to use their own numbering scheme, they can use their own number. We'll track them both, and they can be cross-referenced at any time. And there's a follow-up question here, Chris. Are all digits consistent with revisions? The example is -1.0 and then -1.1. And
yeah, so that is up to the user on how they track those numbers in the revision. So there is no fixed way of saying, hey, this will always be a full digit or a full dot decimal. That is up to the project teams on how they choose to use that.
Yeah, and that's something we've seen with some of the early users of the integration, is that the team has decided to use, I think, like dashes, or maybe it's periods, I can't remember which one, in Procore, but Newforma uses the opposite one. So again, I think we do have some work there to possibly streamline that revision numbering process, but through a project kickoff meeting, guys should align on the way that you want to do it that works for both systems. Okay, I think that wraps it up. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. Really appreciate your time and definitely appreciate the questions.
Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.